in the Bible, and we don't often see the Genesis 2:7 translated this way, but this picks up the play on words that's in the Hebrew. So the Lord God formed the human or humanity from the humus of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the human became a living being. So in Hebrew, human and humus are pretty much the same word. They're Adamah and Adamabha. So that's the way it starts out in the Bible. And the Lord God took that human and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. Next slide. So Earth Day is always on the 22nd of April, and it's coming off in the distance. The theme this year is Restore Our Earth. And why would we want to restore our Earth? Well, to honor our God as creator, of course. And tonight we're going to be particularly doing a lot of thinking and talking about what would Jesus eat, in the sense and the spirit that if we concentrate more ourselves on eating the sorts of things that Jesus would eat, we'll be living more healthy ourselves. So who is involved, likely to be involved with this? Well, Friends of Calvary Baptist, that's us and your friends. When? Well, we're strictly speaking, we're starting tonight, but we're starting after Midwinter Day, which we think of as Groundhog Day. And it'll be running through May, in which we'll be doing a Mediterranean style eating program. So this is going to be not just talking, but there's actually going to be some activity, some getting skin in the game, as we would have been saying lately, with activities at church and home, and particularly an introduction to gardening, not just watching somebody garden on TV, but actually doing gardening ourselves. So there'll be a youth program on sprouting and planting activities, and there'll be family programs on developing menus, and we are planning to grow a Calvary cookbook again for the first time in a while. So I'd like to come back to the Zoom focus at this point and solicit some comments. We're going to be talking a lot more about what would Jesus eat, but what does that mean to you as people of Calvary? And Tia's eating there, Corey is off in the distance eating somewhere, and we'll be talking in more detail about this later on. But just to kind of get you started, what does it mean to think about what would Jesus eat? Deep silence. Okay.
Well, in Africa we have refrigerators.
Go ahead, Everett.
Okay, when I was in Africa, we didn't have refrigeration, so I felt like I understood the Bible a lot better. When guests would arrive, then the host would go out and kill the animal, and you actually would witness that. They would prepare the food for you, and then you would eat. And whatever was left over was shared with everyone around because you couldn't keep it. You had to give it away. Generally, when I would go someplace, I would be given either a pigeon or a rabbit or, chicken.
I love that.
Well, my brother worked for a while in the Galapagos on sabbatical, and there, the local butcher would kill an animal about once a week on an unpredictable time, and he would ring a big bell, and you took your basin and you went down to the butcher, and he was chopping up whatever it was he was cutting up, and you got the next piece that came off of it, no matter what it was. Sometimes it was the nose, sometimes it was the tail, sometimes it was in between. So one of the points we'll be making later this evening is that we've gotten fairly infatuated with meat in our culture, and meat is unhelpful to our global warming situation, as we'll be talking about a little later on. So we need to be eating less meat of all sorts, but in particular, less of bigger animals. Okay, Corey, back to the PowerPoint. So in general, global warming is due to greenhouse gases. And as we are trying to do something about it, we need to cut back on the emission of greenhouse gases, which have been accelerating for the last 50 years. So largely that requires us to use less fossil fuels, and switching over to more solar and wind will stimulate our green collar economy. Now, some of you will have noticed today that the city of Newark has announced that they're embarking on a $50 million program to increase the amount of solar panels available to us here in Newark by about a factor of 6 over the next year. So it will be possible for us here in Newark to actually have what amounts to solar power. When you look at these statistics, as in the pie chart on the left, one of the unrecognized major contributors to greenhouse gases is cattle raising. Now, this is not so much the cow that you're raising on the pasture behind your house. This is when they're cutting down the rainforest to grow soybeans to ship to Indonesia to raise cattle, to be shipped back to the United States, and so forth and so on. So all this grain and beans are being fed to animals, where grain and beans are perfectly acceptable people food. We'll be talking more about that later. So the month of May is designated the month of eating Mediterranean style, and we'll be specifically looking at doing less shipping of vegetables by doing more farm to table. Again, stimulate the green collar economy. And here at Calvary, we're working on some youth and family local projects. Next slide. May, International Mediterranean Diet Month. Now, if you look at the book cover on the left, The Food and Feasts of Jesus, the original Mediterranean diet with menus and recipes. In the middle, just for fun, I've put a book in there. Who Cooked the Last Supper? Did you ever
Love
think
that
about
book
that?
title.
If it had been a man, he'd have a Saints' Day, and there would be a corps of cooks that were following his. But it presumably was a woman, because there's no record whatsoever of actually who cooked the Last Supper. That's women's history is a different subject. Somebody else will get around to that some other night. But I just thought that was a fun title for tonight. And specifically tonight, we're talking about food and climate change without the hot air, if you wish, how you can change your diet in order to help save the planet. Next slide. Part of the problem is that there are massive vested interests who are definitely not interested in our changing our diets to help save the climate. Now, many of you are familiar with Dean Ornish. He's the author of many books on various kinds of diets. And the work that he has been involved with has shown how simple lifestyle changes that any of us can make can indeed reverse most chronic diseases, specifically heart disease, diabetes, many cancers, obesity, and so forth and so on. So the problem is that all of those have vested interests who are strongly opposed to cutting back into their cash flow. And I've listed here some of the major companies. These are by no means the only companies that are in these areas, but these are the ones whose names are most familiar to us here in the United States. So Cargill, for instance, is a major practitioner of big beef worldwide. And Nestle, of course, is sort of the ultimate big dairy worldwide. Did you know that Smithfield is the biggest pork producer worldwide. In fact, they're bigger than practically all the others combined. Big chicken. Tyson is big here in Delaware, and Tyson is big all over the United States and all over the world. Big pesticides. A lot of food grains are involved in using a lot of herbicides to control weeds. They're involved in using genetically engineered seeds, hybrid seeds. Monsanto is the number one seller of those worldwide. And the problem with hybrid seeds is that pollen spreads on the wind and gets into neighboring fields. And when your crops come down with hybrid traits, Monsanto is going to sue you and take your crop and not compensate you for it. Strange. Big flour, Archer Daniels Midland is the number one flour producer in the world, as far as I can tell. Flour and sugar are the two biggest, I should say white flour specifically, highly processed white flour and highly processed sugar are probably the two most dangerous things that we eat a lot of. Big grocery. Did you know that Walmart is the biggest grocery processor in the world? And they've got contracts all the way from the producers all the way forward to their stores, which affect their cash flow. And then big medicine. There are a lot of hospitals and there are a lot of companies that produce pills that are definitely not interested in our getting healthier without their help. Okay, Corey, back to the Zoom pictures, and we'll talk a little bit about how does the idea that there might be vested interests out there who do not want you to live better, who do not want you to eat better, but who would rather have you continue pouring your money into their pockets. Does that distract you in any sort of way? Deep silence. Cindy looks like she's working up a comment there.
I'm just not what you mean by deep. What was the term you used? Sorry.
Well, the term I was using, or the point I was trying to make, was that there are a great many people who would rather see you eating a cheeseburger made with fatty beef on a white flour bun than eating a meal involving much more foods that are much healthier for you. Because if you're eating the cheeseburger on the white flour bun, it's money in their pocket. If you're eating locally produced whole grain bread, for example, that's money that Walmart or Archer Daniels Midlands or Cargill is losing. And there's a billionaire somewhere that's looking at his balance sheet and saying, oh my, there's money I could have made that's going to somebody else. Did that answer your question, Tia?
I mean, I got the point. I guess you were asking us how we feel about that. Is that what the question was?
No,
Well, I don't feel good about that.
do you feel badly enough to do something differently? That's the question we're talking about tonight. And we'll help you do it differently. Darlene has
Yeah, when I used to work for the union, Walmart, it wasn't what they, I guess what they, so how they treated their employees. So we boycott Walmart. So not until I'm gonna say maybe the last 3 years, I went to Walmart, and I'm gonna say probably in the last 3 years, I've probably gone there 10 times, and I always felt kind of guilty. So that's one. So I'm not big on Walmart because I don't see the thrill in it, but it's right down the road from me. So, I'm not really I'm not a pork eater. I'm not really a beef eater because beef stay in your system for a long, long time. So I don't feel guilty. I don't do Tyson. I like Purdue better than Tyson because Tyson they don't treat their chicken right. So,
They don't treat their employees very well
well,
either.
right. And yeah, they don't do that either. Yeah, so I am somewhat conscious, and I do take take into effect that they're billionaires, so I'm not going to continue to contribute to them, and they're not giving back. So I think about that as well.
Do you know who the first billionaire was in terms of today's money? It was King Herod the Great. He at the time was probably the richest man in the world from all the taxation that he levied on the people that he was king over. So moving right along, Corey, back to the PowerPoint. One of the things that has been a helpful program lately, locally, is Central Baptist in Wilmington has started and has been running for the last couple of years, something they call Urban Acres Produce. And the person who is in charge of that is Mike Miner, who's a good friend of Calvary. He's traveled with us on mission trips. And many of you will remember being with him in Mexico and in Appalachia. And I believe the last I looked, they have 10 different locations around the city of Wilmington where they've found an old vacant lot that was empty and full of trash, and they've recruited volunteers. The volunteers have turned it into a garden that generates produce, which they donate to the local people to improve their access to healthful foods. And here in Newark, you will have noticed if you drive around Newark that Calvary is the only church in Newark that has a public garden. And for those of you that help out at Hope Dining Room, you will know that we have we've had some produce from there at Hope Dining Room over the years. And we have people that come to Hope Dining Room, but one lady in particular comes to mind. Tom, you might remember her name, I don't, that is very fond of our garden. She stops by there practically every day to see what's coming along. So we are starting a ministry of reaching out to our neighbors to help them improve their diet. There's a lot more that could be done in that direction. Next slide, please.
I want to point out that Mike's apron says, "Don't make me poison your food."
Exactly. And if what he's talking about there is that the pesticides and pesticides in particular, he's an organic gardener, and he can lecture you at length about all the strangeness that comes with using pesticides on your gardens. Next slide. So the Creation Care team is proposing that Calvary proceed on beyond our public garden into some youth and family local projects for this current year coming. For the youth, we're proposing to have a seedling project where we sprout seedlings at church and at home, and then later we will plant those, grow, harvest, and eat, and so forth. We are encouraging the youth to have a project journal, and I'll have more to say about that later. Families, we're talking about starting a project journal of your own, of farm to table ideas. Christine is working on developing a new Eat Clean cookbook for production in late March, early April of this year. And a first impression of what the cover might look like there is on the left. We're going to encourage families to grow some pea seedlings to harvest. The point in choosing sugar peas is that every part of the plant is edible. The pea sprouts and the pea shoots and the mature peas, everything about the plant is edible. So you can start snacking on it pretty soon after it sprouts. Next slide, please. This is what a sugar snap pea looks like for those of you that are maybe a little less gardening sensitive. The plan for the youth project, it is well known that if you pre-soak peas before you plant them, they sprout better. But it matters what you use as the pre-soak, and we're about to talk more about that. So the youth will actually have a project in February to compare different pre-soaks, where they will pre-soak the batch of seeds. Those seeds, they will plant those seeds in a egg carton in good soil at church, and they'll take it home and they'll watch it. They'll track the height the seedlings grow versus time. They'll track what it tastes like, what the seedlings taste like, because those shoots, when they get to be about 5 or 6 inches high, are yummy. You would pay big bucks for those in a store where they're called microgreens. And if we have any younger kids, we would do a simpler version of that. At the moment, I think the 6th graders are our youngest kids. They're capable of doing the full older project. Next slide, please. And here is what we can do as adults. Now, the word diet has a unhelpful connotation in our cultures. The diet is considered to be something that you take on for a little while, and it's to allow you to do something like lose 5 pounds or whatever. And then you come back off of it and regain the 5 pounds. So what we're talking about here is eating healthier, so Mediterranean style, if you want to use that term. And I'll just kind of run through this pyramid and run through the text on the chart here, and then we'll have some discussions for you to ask questions. So years ago, somebody came up with the idea of a diet pyramid where up at the pointy part at the top is what you don't want to eat much of, and down at the wide part at the base is what you want to do a lot of. So on the Mediterranean, you won't see these pyramids anymore, incidentally, because the big agriculture companies have decided that it is unhelpful to their bottom line to have people thinking about precisely this point. So starting from the top and working down, we have meat and sweets, and incidentally, sweets includes processed white flour. So those are things that you should be eating sparingly. Poultry, eggs, cheese, and yogurt, you can eat a couple of times a week if you're careful about how you do it, eating them along with other things which are more helpful to you. Fish and seafood are even less of a problem for the global warming issues. What you want to eat as much as you choose to eat of is fresh vegetables, grains, whole grains. You want to eat the skin of the vegetables. That's where most of the nutrition is. Olive oil, beans, nuts, legumes and seeds, herbs and spices. You can eat as much of those things as you like, and the more you eat of them relative to the things higher up, the better your health is likely to get. And the bottommost part of the pyramid is be physically active and enjoy your meals with others. Now, that's less of an opportunity in today's COVID situation, but it is well established that if you eat moderate amounts of food and get at least moderate amounts of exercise, your health generally improves dramatically. So we are proposing tonight, and Christine can have more to say about this in a few minutes if she chooses to, that Calvary will be coming up with a cookbook of suggestions from members of the congregation about with recipes for ways to eat better on the Mediterranean diet style perspective. Eat Clean, Calvary 2021. So back to the Zoom view. Let's have some discussion.
So I have a question, Jim. I mean, this sounds wonderful and I want to do it, but let's be realistic. I can't just change my diet tomorrow. So how much do I need to do? Like if I start eating one vegetarian day a week, or so like how much do I need to do to start?
Well, Dr. Ornish, the books, his several books, particularly the one I showed earlier, says that if you can cut back at least one meal a week, you'll start making progress. 2 meals a week would be even better. You can switch out ingredients in the meals that you do use. For example, let's say that you were choosing to have a piece of steak. Well, instead of buying a big old 8-ounce piece of steak, limit yourself to 4 ounces of steak. Instead of having, let's say, supersized French fries, let's say that you had some whole grain bread instead of the French fries, and so forth and so on. You get the idea?
Yeah, and what about getting like free range, grass fed type things? Is
Everything in that direction is helpful.
okay, so
But you have to, in general, that's only going to be in the summertime when you are able to get them locally. For example, our favorite food farm to table shop is a little Pennsylvania Dutch shop south of Elkman called Detweiler's. And they've got the fresh vegetables, they've got the free range beef, they've got the free range turkeys and so forth. You can actually see the turkeys growing in the field next door while you're getting ready for Thanksgiving, that sort of thing. And their processing plant is a Pennsylvania Dutch butcher that's about a half a mile down the road that processes the grass-fed stuff. But they're only open from Easter till Thanksgiving for all intents and purposes. So you're going to have to get creative when it's cold weather.
What about going to the farmer's market?
The farmer's market in Newcastle, some of what's there is in fact from farmers, but a lot of that is just outlets for big grocery chains. I don't go to the farmer's market in Elkton because I've got a better farmer's market closer. I didn't say Elkton. Newcastle was the one I meant to say. The one that's near you there.
I was thinking about it, or Newark, right? They're the same, basically the same.
Well, the Newark Farmers Market is primarily a Hispanic and Asian grocery. The stuff they've got is, yes, it's as far as I can tell, it's pretty close to farm to table. It's as close to farm to table as they can manage. Other questions? Let's move on then. Actually, Christine, I should have given you did you want to say anything about the cookbook? This is kind of the first unveiling of it. Should have given you a chance to say something.
My apologies. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
You
I
went
can hear you.
frozen. Okay, perfect. So, well, yeah, the cookbook, I'm very excited about it. I was just listening to some of the comments that you guys were talking about, changing your diet and what that might look like and how much of a effort that could be. So that's why what was really inspiring to me for the cookbook idea is because I don't think that it would be realistic or practical to think that we're all just going to up and eat vegetarian or a plant-based diet all at once or overnight. The cookbook really would be ideas that are vegetables, whole grains, definitely fish, more of the, I don't want to call it a Mediterranean diet, but things that are noted to be more healthy for us than eating kind of our American-based diet. So the recipes that we would look to collect would include things like that. Any recipes for whole grain meals, something with quinoa or farro or I don't know, brown rice, whatever the case is, vegetables. I was thinking even when people come to pick from our community garden, um, I know that when I go to like ShopRite and I do grocery shopping, they have little recipe cards next to the cucumbers or next to this or next to the salmon. So I know what would be a good complement to the meal. And I'm thinking of ideas like that, but all of the recipes that we would get from the congregation or ask for congregates to submit would be around this clean eating lifestyle. So whole grains, fruits, vegetables, minimal dairy, seafood and fish. Yeah, not, minimal fat, more towards your olive oil, those type of things. It would also include tips on how to, clean the vegetables and fruits that we get from the grocery store that do have those pesticides on them. It would include information on why it's good to eat, red vegetables and fruits and what's good about eating green fruits and vegetables, what's good for you in an orange fruit or vegetable and so forth. So really just looking again back to this idea of getting skin in the game for people to get invested in thinking about how we can change our diets and some of our consumption in a way that works for us, not something that you're being forced to do or you're doing it begrudgingly, but something that you've invested personally. Hey, I like this recipe for asparagus that I found, and if everyone could kind of come together and share their ideas, I think it could really be a good resource for us, not only at the church but also in other communities and congregations. I hope that helps to clarify. And Pastor Corey, I was going to do it today before the meeting, but I'm certainly going to get it to you. Something to put in the newsletter and perhaps on the PowerPoint slide that plays before worship on Sundays, just so that we can start getting the request out there for people to think about recipes that fit into these categories, so we can have them together by the end of March for a hard copy, a tangible cookbook to come out during this Mediterranean Healthy Eating Month in May. And it's also going to be a virtual copy or virtual access on the church website.
Okay, I think we're going to have to move on at that point. I'm keeping an eye on the clock. Next slide, Curry, is the calendar slide. And then we'll get into a sample of what the youth will be doing. So this is the overall calendar that we are proposing. The 10th of February, Kyle has lined us up to start the seedling project with the youth. Ash Wednesday is on the 17th of February, and that's the beginning of Lent. We have a work day scheduled for the 6th of March to prepare the outdoor bed for planting the pea seeds, which we'll do on St. Patrick's Day, which is the traditional day for planting peas. 28th of March is Palm Sunday. 1st of April is Fossil Fuels Day, fossil fuels. 4th of April is Easter. 22nd of April is Earth Day. And the whole month of May is eat Mediterranean style in the spirit of what Christine was just talking about. So specifically the youth, which we are about to go through in a little bit more detail, in a couple of weeks, we're going to be starting some seeds to indoors and see which of them sprout better. Then you'll be able to eat the sprouts. On the March 17th, we'll be having chosen a better way of soaking the seeds. We will soak some and plant them outdoors at church, and we're certainly going to encourage you to plant some at home as well. In April, we'll be tracking the growth of those peas. In May, we'll be starting the pea harvest. And once the peas have gotten going, there'll be both edible pea shoots that you can be nibbling on. Then in June, it'll be getting so warm that it'll be time to finish the pea harvest. So next slide, please. So this is kind of a preview of the program that we're going to be doing with the youth. I'd like to start with reading Jesus's parable of the seeds, or the parable of the sower. While a large crowd was gathering and people were coming to Jesus from town after town, he told this parable. A farmer went out to sow his seed, and as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path. It was trampled on, and the birds of the air ate it up. Some fell on rock, and when it came up, the plants withered because they had no moisture. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up with it and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil. It came up and yielded a crop 100 times more than was sown. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. So I would propose that the farmer expected a good harvest. The seeds were all the same, but the growing conditions were not the same and the results were different. So our project is to plant and to grow pea seeds, and we're trying to determine what conditions yield better results and organize our planting so that we do those conditions. Next slide. So what is a seed? This picture here is of a corn seed, not a pea seed, but it's a baby plant sleeping until conditions are right to wake up and grow. There's food to get started. It's called an endosperm there. There's a protective coating called a seed coat. And there's the embryo, which will develop into the new plant. So what keeps it asleep? Staying dry. What wakes it up? Getting wet. But what else is in the water matters. Next slide. Now, what's in these bottles different? They're all mostly water, but even dry seeds can tell the difference. And we can test before planting, and that's what we'll be doing with the youth. We'll make a 1 in 50 dilute solution of what's in these bottles, 2 teaspoons in a pint of boiled water. We soak the seeds for 12 hours. We plant in good dirt in labeled egg cartons, and I will have all of those to hand out to the kids. You take them home to a safe place, and you measure how high they get every day. How many of the seeds sprouted? How tall do they get? How fast? And the seeds that are sprouting in the front bedroom here in my house, it looks like they start coming up in the 3rd day after they're planted. They're wasting no time. The ones that are doing well are doing very well. Next slide. So the general idea here is that we're going to plant the seeds in dirt, in egg cartons. We're going to track the number of days until we see seedlings, and it's looking like it's going to be on the 3rd day, I'll be seeing the first seedlings here. We measure how high they get every day and give them a little sprinkle of water every day. Then you'll be able to compare the effect of seeds that started out soaked differently. And this would be a good place to draw a graph of your results. Compare your notes with other kids and agree on a soak for outdoor planting. And then what happens to the sprouts that are coming up in those egg cartons? Well, when they get at least 4 inches high, they're good to eat. Everything about peas is edible. Next slide. So this is a photograph of the back of the church. The trustees have approved of this project. The general idea is that there will be a bed along the south fence on the flat part of the dirt there, about 2 feet inside the south fence, because it drops down rather abruptly toward the fence. We'll cultivate all the way down to soil that has worms in it, and then put some good soil on top of that. And Tom and I are talking about what the best way to do that is, and Everett and I are talking about how to do the cultivation. Then there will be some frames similar to, but different from the ones out front, that will provide cords for the vines to climb on. The particular peas that I have purchased are not as tall as the ones that were out front this summer. They're only supposed to get 3 feet tall, but I've seen some comments that the peas haven't got that message, and they like to climb up 4 or 5 feet. So we'll provide enough room for them. The kids will be keeping track of their vines with time. How high are they getting with suitable watering? Now, one of the challenges is that there's no water spigot on the back of the church. So we'll have to organize some watering teams to bring watering cans back there when it's dry.
I think they used to be called bucket brigades.
Yes, well, it doesn't take that much water, but yes, some people will need to be organized to do the watering. First flowering will probably be about 8 weeks out, which will be, if we plant in the middle of March, that'll say about the middle of May. First edible pod will probably be about a week later, and we'll keep track of what the total number of edible pods is from each vine. And I suppose there will probably be some competitive kids who will be paying attention to whose peas are getting bigger, and my peas are bigger than your peas, and I'm getting more peas than you are. Plus the tendrils are excellent to eat, and if you pinch them off at the right place, you'll get another tendril there. It'll keep replacing the tendrils. So the next slide and last slide.
Cynthia, you wanted to interject something?
I was just going to ask, did you consider getting rain barrels so you can capture water off of the roof when it rains? Or is it still too cold for that?
The problem is that rain barrels coming off of a roof that's made with tar like our roof is, the water is a little bit inhibitory to the growing of plants. Yes, I thought about it, and you see where the window over there with some slats on it, there's a downspout that comes down right by that window and goes out underground across just right in front of where our beds will be. But my experience with rain barrels has been that when you're there, it's fine for plants that are already as big as they're going to get. But if you're talking about putting it on rapidly growing plants, it's like pine needles. Pine needles prevent young plants from growing. They prevent sprouting. So that's why you don't see much in the way of seedlings coming up under pine trees, because it's inhibitory. It's pretty much the same tar that's in the roof. So I don't think it would be a good idea to use rain barrels for this. Did that satisfy you?
Yeah, that's fine. It's not been our experience. We use a rain barrel here at home, and we've had good luck with it. But you know, maybe our roof is a different composition. I don't know.
Well, I'm just saying that's a concern you have to be careful about when you're using a rain barrel. It's fine for watering perennials and shrubs and that sort of thing, but for new sprouts, it's not so good. usually.
Yeah, our experience is that the plants like the rainwater off our roof more than they like the chlorinated water from a hose. They do much better when we take the rain barrel water and put them on them than when we spray them with chlorinated city water. There's no question in my mind. I've done it enough seasons to know that's true.
You know, I'm partial to putting a little pinch of vitamin C in the water to kill off any chlorine that's in it before you use it to water with. Okay, moving right along because our time is moving right along. The intent here is that we encourage the kids to write this up as a science project. And the usual sort of project here, you would have what is the question? What is the background? What are you proposing to do, and what do you think will happen if you do it? That's your hypothesis. What are the materials that you're proposing to use to test this hypothesis? What is the procedure? How are you proposing to move through this? Then you have your observations and your data in tables and graphs if you choose to use them. And what are your conclusions? So we were thinking that this is a process. Some of our kids are still hybrid, and some of you may end up being the science teacher for your kid doing this project. So we're going to, this is the last slide, and we're going to open it back up to the Zoom slides for discussion of the whole program, plus anything specifically about specific aspects of it. Questions, comments?
Yeah, this is Alan. I'd like to add one thing to the eat clean idea. We focused a lot on the healthy part and all that, and we kind of touched on it, but the other part is we want to together learn and share ideas of how we can make less impact on our planet by one of the things we all have to do, which is eat. And Gina McCarthy, who was the EPA director under Obama for his last 4 years, made a statement when she was asked, what's the best thing you can do as an individual? And she said, stop eating red meat. Doesn't mean you have to stop eating red meat, but red meat actually does, for the amount of protein you get out of red meat, the amount of damage it does to our planet is just out of order. And if you don't, so the idea is not necessarily that you have to become a vegetarian, but to at least know that these decisions you're making and understand, are they sustainable eating decisions or not? And obviously eating local, you have less transportation, so it's a cleaner way to eat. Eating fresh vegetables are healthier for you than things that have been picked many months ago or earlier and shipped a long distance. Something you pick right out of your garden always tastes better. So in addition to the healthy part, and that's why it has the clean in it, is also we can do things in little ways. And like Tia asked, one day is one bit of improvement. So I'm not saying everybody should go all out. You should explore this and learn and understand. And as you have knowledge, you will make the decisions that you think are best as a Christian for caring about your creation. And those are all individual decisions.
Yeah, just a specific example, picking up on what Alan is saying there. You can go to any fast food place around and you can get a quarter-pound hamburger, a quarter-pound cheeseburger on a white bun. You know what the global warming effect of that is? It's the same as driving 10 miles in your car. And so how many cheeseburgers get eaten in this country compared to how many miles get driven in cars going to get those cheeseburgers? And for example.
Okay, Jim. All right, here you go. And this is I'm going to stir the pot here a little bit for Calvary. Okay. First of all, this old science teacher will not be grading those reports that the students are doing. Okay. So, okay, but and may I also, on the rain barrel thing, may I suggest there was a perfect little experiment to do. Half your garden gets rainwater, half your garden gets city water. Okay. So
Good point.
you can do it that way and then, prove it out. Okay. But the next one here is a biggie. Okay. Okay. By your calculations there, we drive somewhere in excess of 2,000 or 3,000 miles on the 4th of July, serving cheeseburgers on white buns. And no, I'm not going to serve salmon on the 4th of July. But okay, and here's my thought. Okay, to what extent does Calvary, trying to celebrate and at the same time educate, and recognizing that the guys we're trying to educate are pretty sometimes hardcore there. They don't care about what they eat. They just want food. It's just a whole different ball game. Like I got a phone call tonight. Tom, we are so hungry down here. We have nothing. So, okay. I go get some hungry man meals that they can do in the microwave.
Right.
I don't think about eating healthy at that level. But okay, 4th of July, I shop at BJ's. I get white hamburger buns. I get BJ's hamburgers. I have no idea what the source is of that beef. I suspect whatever, it's fairly cheap, probably, grain fed. So does Calvary want to, since we're using, Calvary is paying for this, does Calvary want to say, hey, we need to up our game? We're not going to solve that question tonight in the 30 seconds that are remaining.
Tick, 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 tick.
It's something to think about, when we finally be able to have these big honking barbecues.
Do you mind if I take a stab at that? Because I think that you bring up a very important point there, Mr. Parkins, and to kind of tie it all together and connect the dots. The creation care team is not just about eating healthy. It's not just about, solar panels. It's not just about using recycled products. The idea is that as we give back to the environment, that's going to have a positive impact in all quadrants, in our health, not only in our physical health and our bodies for us as individuals, but also for our world, for our animals, for the ecosystem, for things like social injustice. Because for some people to be able to afford to eat healthy and others to not be able to afford to eat healthy, there's an injustice there, there's an imbalance there. And the creation care team is really concerned with bringing a balance back to the system. So whether that is in our lifestyle choices, our financial decisions, our healthcare, whatever the case may be, where there is a lack of balance or an out of balance, which we see prevalent all over the community, we're looking to restore creation to the way that it was intended to be at the beginning, which is peace and justice and harmony for everyone, not just for people who have access or for people who can afford it. And the way that we get to that place is little by little making decisions that are in line and conscious with caring for other people and loving other people, loving ourselves, loving God, and loving others.
Amy,